YouTube is going live. YouTube is going live. YouTube is going live. Okay, maybe we should start. Maybe we should start. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us in this important day and important webinar. We are holding this webinar on the occasion of the Global Day of Action. Maybe we should start. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us in this important day and important webinar. We are holding this webinar on the occasion of the Global Day of Action in solidarity with the people of Venezuela. Hello, everybody. What is going on? We are getting echo. This important day and important webinar. We are holding this webinar on the occasion of the Global Day of Action in solidarity with the people of Venezuela. Hold on, let me turn off this. We are getting echo.
Bahman, you have to turn off the YouTube and any other channel.
Hold on. Forgive me, we need to fix that.
Bahman, you have to turn off the YouTube and
yes,
any other channel.
Yes. Hold on. Forgive me, we need to fix that. It is repeating. Is it fixed?
Yes.
Okay, once again, I repeat. Thank you for joining us. Apologies for the echo. Thank you for joining on this important day and important webinar. In 2015, the World Peace Council declared the April 19th, which is the day of the start of the struggle, Bolivarian struggle against the Spanish colonialism, as a day of international solidarity with the people of Venezuela. And we are holding this webinar on the occasion of that day, although it is not exactly on that day because of two reasons. One, a lot of activities are going on in Venezuela tomorrow, so we decided not to conflict with that. And secondly, it would be a better idea to do it on a weekend so more people can participate. And yes, another channel. Yes. What is going on? Something is repeating. Something. Is it fixed? I hope so. I don't know why he's doing this. Yes. Okay. Once again, I repeat. Thank you for joining us. Apologies for the echo. Thank you for joining on this important day and important webinar. In 2015, the World Peace Council declared the April 19th, which is the day of the start of the struggle, Bolivarian struggle against the Spanish colonialism, as a day of international solidarity with the people of Venezuela. And we are holding this webinar on the occasion of that day, although it is not exactly on that day because of two reasons. One, a lot of activities are going on in Venezuela tomorrow, so we decided not to conflict with that. And secondly, it would be a better idea to do it on a weekend so more people can participate. We have some echo. Okay, I think we finally resolved it. We try to have representatives. Of course, this program is organized by World Peace Council in collaboration with the COSI Venezuela and US Peace Council. We decided that we should have representations from across the globe, from various organizations, member organizations of the World Peace Council. Of course, many of the member organizations were very much interested in participating in this webinar, but obviously because of the limitations of space and time, we could not accommodate all of that. So we apologize for other comrades in different countries who did not get a chance to speak here. About our program, we're going to have speakers. We are honored to have Carlos Ron, the Vice Foreign Minister of Venezuela and President of Simón Bolívar Institute. We start with Carlos and then continue with the other speakers. A few things I would like to mention. We're going to have a question answer period at the end. Please, if you have any questions, put it in the Q&A section and not in the chat because it will get lost in the middle of all those other exchanges. Secondly, please, speakers, please turn off mute your mics because you may have echo in the background. The question answer period will start after all the speeches are over. I'm honored to introduce to you now my dear comrade Carlos Ron, Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs of Venezuela and the President of Simón Bolívar Institute. Carlos, please.
Thank you very much, Baman, y buenos días a todos y todas que nos acompañan de todas partes del mundo. Es un enorme placer estar aquí desde Caracas, Venezuela, con ustedes en este día especial, un día en que ustedes han hecho especial por esa muestra de solidaridad con Venezuela. Sepan desde lo más profundo de nuestro corazón que siempre agradecemos ese esfuerzo de solidaridad que tienen todas estas organizaciones, el Consejo Mundial de la Paz y todas las organizaciones que forman parte con Venezuela y con el pueblo venezolano, con esta revolución y con este proceso histórico que hoy, en este año 2021, cumple 200 años de un momento particularmente importante, que es el momento de la batalla de Carabobo, el momento de nuestra lucha de independencia, donde se consolida finalmente la independencia venezolana y se hace irreversible. Pero no solamente se hace irreversible en Venezuela, sino que también marca un impulso para garantizar la independencia de los otros países de la América del Sur que fueron liberados en esta ola, como Colombia, Perú, Bolivia, Ecuador, inclusive Panamá, que formaba parte de la Gran Colombia en ese momento. Y eso quiere decir que estamos en un momento que marcó, esa batalla de Carabobo marcó un nuevo comienzo para la historia de la América del Sur, porque era el comienzo de una nueva etapa, de una vida libre, soberana, de la expulsión del imperialismo español en ese momento. Nuestro comandante Hugo Chávez nos decía que cuando llegara este momento, cuando llegara este año 2021, teníamos que verlo también como un momento importante, un momento histórico, un hito fundamental para los procesos de liberación, no solamente el de Venezuela, sino el del resto de nuestra América. Teníamos que llegar a 2021, un bicentenario que fuera no solamente un recuerdo de una gloria pasada, un recuerdo de un hito histórico, sino más bien una especie de plataforma, una especie de nuevo impulso para ver también dónde estamos nosotros hoy en día y hacia dónde vamos. Y es que la emancipación suramericana no es diferente de toda la emancipación humana. Y eso es lo que nos trae hoy, nos convoca hoy a varios pueblos del mundo. Aquí tenemos camaradas de todas partes, de África del Sur, de Grecia, de Brasil, de Estados Unidos, porque este momento bicentenario no es solamente un hito para el pueblo venezolano, es un momento importante para toda la humanidad, especialmente cuando la crisis del capitalismo nos ha llevado a entender, más que nunca con esta pandemia, que ese modelo no tiene fuerza ni conciencia, ni estructura suficiente para garantizar los derechos de la humanidad, para garantizar la vida del planeta, para garantizar un futuro para todos nosotros y nosotros. Entonces es importante que en este momento que nos convoca Carabobo a estos 200 años, así como fue un momento de emancipación en aquel entonces, bueno, que este sea un nuevo momento para nosotros encontrarnos y también pensar qué rumbo debemos tomar, qué rumbo deben tomar nuestros procesos, qué rumbo deben tomar nuestros movimientos populares, qué rumbo debe tomar este planeta ante esta crisis del capitalismo, ante la insuficiencia de ese modelo de darle respuestas a los pueblos. Nosotros estamos convocando un gran congreso bicentenario aquí en Venezuela en los días de junio, cuando se cumple los 200 años de la batalla, y será entre los días 21 y 24 de junio. Y esperamos que muchos de ustedes puedan estar aquí con nosotros y acompañarnos y que podamos reflexionar sobre ese nuevo rumbo al que debemos unirnos, no solamente un nuevo rumbo para Venezuela, sino para todo el mundo. Quiero también resaltar lo siguiente, cómo vemos la solidaridad entonces en un momento así y cómo pensar la solidaridad con Venezuela. Y yo creo que ha sido muy importante en los últimos años la resistencia, la lucha que se ha dado contra esta guerra híbrida que hay contra Venezuela, contra esta ola de ataques incesantes contra nuestro país. Primero, con la lucha que inició el comandante Chávez, pero que hoy en día el presidente Maduro también está encabezando junto al pueblo venezolano, junto a sus organizaciones, junto a toda la estructura del poder popular de resistencia contra los embates del imperialismo. Yo creo que es importante que la solidaridad tenga por lo menos cuatro momentos o cuatro pilares fundamentales. Primero, hay que oponerse en todo momento a la intervención militar, a los ataques de manera bélica que a cada momento continúan en contra de Venezuela. Es importante decir esto porque así no haya habido aún una invasión o un tipo de agresión militar convencional de la que se ha visto en el pasado en otros lugares del mundo en contra de Venezuela. Bueno, hemos visto también distintas manifestaciones de agresiones, incluso a nivel militar. Hace pocos días tuvimos unos eventos muy preocupantes en nuestra frontera con Colombia, donde existe un gobierno que apoya totalmente esta búsqueda por parte del imperialismo de un cambio de gobierno en Venezuela, que lo ha apoyado desde siempre digamos, con sus métodos anticonstitucionales y sus métodos violentos, y bueno, y ha apoyado a un grupo de criminales en la frontera que han atacado inclusive a puestos militares, a estaciones eléctricas, ha hecho toda una serie de ataques que en sí son manifestaciones bélicas. Entonces es importante que la solidaridad defienda el derecho a la paz en Venezuela y que haga un importante llamado a conciencia sobre ese tema. El segundo punto son las medidas coercitivas unilaterales ilegales en contra de nuestro país. La solidaridad tiene que activarse en contra en denunciar, mejor dicho, esas medidas porque son ilegales, contrarían el derecho internacional y han sometido al todo el pueblo venezolano a momentos de sufrimiento, de dificultades, que aun cuando nosotros tengamos la resistencia y la valentía de afrontar esos problemas, pues es importante la solidaridad del mundo para denunciarlos y para poner fin a esa ilegalidad. En tercer lugar, el tercer pilar, que es muy importante, defender la democracia popular, la democracia participativa y protagónica de Venezuela. Los venezolanos, las venezolanas tenemos el derecho de escoger el sistema de gobierno, la fórmula de gobierno que nuestro pueblo quiera, que exprese a través de sus manifestaciones democráticas, a través de las elecciones, a través del sistema de gobierno que nos hemos dado todos en nuestra nueva Constitución del año 1999. Entonces es muy importante que la solidaridad defienda ese derecho de no intervención en los asuntos internos de Venezuela, que respeten la voluntad del pueblo venezolano. Y finalmente, yo creo que es muy importante que la solidaridad en Venezuela o hacia Venezuela no sea vista solamente como un espacio para defender a la Venezuela, digamos, asediada o bajo ataque, pero también para defender a la Venezuela que construye, que está trazando un nuevo modelo. Nosotros estamos avanzando hacia una sociedad comunal, hacia un proyecto diferente, alternativo al neoliberalismo, alternativo al capitalismo explotador. Estamos construyendo en medio de todo el asedio posible, en medio de todas estas agresiones, cuando nos cortan las fórmulas para que entren las medicinas y los alimentos a Venezuela, para cuando nos cortan la entrada de combustible. A pesar de todo eso, nosotros estamos construyendo viviendas, estamos tratando de organizar, bueno, se ha organizado el pueblo en comunas con una lógica de la construcción del socialismo en lo real, en lo territorial. Y eso es un desafío muy grande, pero es un desafío al que nosotros queremos llamar a conciencia, porque queremos que defiendan a Venezuela, no solamente porque Venezuela esté siendo atacada por el imperialismo, sino que defiendan a Venezuela porque representa un proyecto de futuro para la humanidad, porque representa un proyecto de justicia social, porque representa un proyecto de construcción de paz y de construcción de un mundo donde estamos apegados a la justicia social. Así que bueno, yo sé, hay muchas participaciones en este espacio. Estamos muy felices, muy contentos de compartirlo con ustedes. Agradecemos con todo nuestro corazón la solidaridad que todas las organizaciones tienen hacia Venezuela. Y quiero también ustedes que sepan que Venezuela siempre estará allí en cada momento que ustedes necesiten del apoyo y la solidaridad de la revolución bolivariana. Nosotros estamos allí en la lucha, por ejemplo, ahorita en nuestra América, que veo aquí a nuestra compañera Socorro, estamos de frente en la lucha, apoyando al pueblo brasileño frente a todas las dificultades que atraviesa en la pandemia, y así con todos los pueblos del mundo. No los voy a nombrar a todos porque son muchos, pero así con el pueblo de Estados Unidos también, nosotros estamos en solidaridad con ustedes, y cuenten siempre con la solidaridad del pueblo venezolano. Agradecidos y atento para escucharlos en este encuentro de hermandad y fraternidad.
Thank you very much, Carlos. I would like to now introduce to you the president of the World Peace Council, Comrade Socorro Gomes, who resides in Brazil, and she is speaking from there for us. Comrade Socorro.
Gracias, camarada. Bom, em primeiro, eu gostaria de aproveitar este momento para dar um bom dia caloroso, fraterno, a todos os companheiros que aqui estão presentes, nesse momento de tragédia, né, sanitária que prejudica e dana a todos os povos, né, especialmente os mais desvalidos, os mais já saqueados. E queria saludar, e vou tentar ler mi texto em espanhol, porque é muito complicado o portunhol para os tradutores, não? Então, saludar aos companheiros do Conselho Mundial de la Paz, ao companheiro Carlos Rom, presidente do Instituto Simón Bolívar, que representa aqui os aguerridos venezuelanos, né? Saudar o companheiro de COSE, companheiro Gabriel Aguirre, ao companheiro Cris Matilac, de África, a companheira Aida, do Conselho de Paz e Solidariedade israelense, ao companheiro Barman, que coordena esses trabalhos, não é? E ao companheiro Iraclis, não é? Que é o companheiro secretário executivo do Conselho Mundial da Paz, ao companheiro Arun de Epson, não? Da Paz e Solidariedade de toda a Índia. Queridos companheiros, aqui nós estamos atravessando, muito próximo de Venezuela, essa situação de extrema dificuldade. E, ainda assim, queremos registrar o espírito solidário do povo e do governo venezuelano, no momento que nós, no Brasil, atravessamos uma tragédia além do que se imagina, que é a falta de oxigênio para as pessoas que estão em UTI. Então, mais uma vez, agradecendo, que é uma ajuda que se mantém com os companheiros, especialmente ali da Amazônia, né? E que o companheiro Casron transmita. Queridos companheiros e companheiras, é um honor participar deste evento por el Dia Internacional de Solidariedade com o Pueblo Venezolano, protagonista da Revolução Bolivariana. E nesta ocasião, o Conselho Mundial de la Paz se associa ao pueblo de Bolívia e Chávez, à direção revolucionária e patriótica de seu país e a seu líder, o presidente Nicolás Maduro, e COSE, Comitê de Solidariedade Internacional da Venezuela. Tomo esta oportunidade para expressar meus votos de congratulações por o 50 aniversário desta importante organização social, ativo membro do Conselho Mundial da Paz, que completa seus 50 anos daqui a pouquíssimos dias. El COSE, estabelecido em 1971, joga um importante rol na luta por la paz em la região latino-americana e caribenha, por la integração de la região com soberania, autodeterminação, democracia, pleno desenvolvimento social, justiça e direitos humanos. É admirável a atividade desenvolvida por el COSE para promover a solidariedade entre os pueblos de todo o mundo, reafirmando sempre os ideais bolivarianos como um ideal comum a los pueblos latino-americanos e del mundo. Desejamos novas e mais grandes vitórias al COSE em las primeiras fileiras de la batalha em defesa de la consolidação e de profundizar de la revolução bolivariana de seu país. Queridas companheiros e queridos companheiros, o Conselho Mundial por la Paz está honrado por compartilhar com centenas de organizações sociais e políticas de todo o mundo ações de solidariedade com Venezuela por ocasião de 19 de abril. Estas ações de solidariedade com a pátria de Bolívia e Chávez são mais necessárias à medida que constatamos a infame e caluniosa campanha contra o pueblo venezolano e seus líderes por parte do imperialismo estadunidense e seus meios de comunicação, que se han vuelto em verdadeiras usinas de mentiras e desinformação. Esta campanha tem por objetivo promover o aislamento político e diplomático de Venezuela, abrir passo para os golpes, intervenções e agressões à soberania nacional do país. Seus promotores querem e tentam quebrar a unidade do pueblo venezolano, minar sua moral, abater seu ânimo e derrotar-lhe inutilmente. Solidariedade com Venezuela é aún mais necessária no momento em que bloqueio e sanções econômicas, comerciais e financeiras mostram sua face mais cruel quando o país enfrenta os efeitos da pandemia del Covid-19 e se agravam as dificuldades do pueblo em termos de abastecimento de combustível e de las carências de alimentos e medicinas e em los serviços públicos. O Conselho Mundial por la Paz defende o fim imediato de las sanções unilaterais criminosas impostas por los Estados Unidos. é necessário unir e mobilizar forças em todo o mundo por esta causa, como medida indispensável em defesa da vida do povo venezolano, uma causa humanitária a ser defendida por todos os amantes da paz e defensores da autodeterminação dos pueblos, contra a guerra econômica e o recrudescimento da política de ingerência de los Estados Unidos contra a Venezuela. O criminal bloqueio impuesto por los Estados Unidos a Venezuela é o principal obstáculo para que seu povo haga frente a los problemas sociais, entre eles os ocasionados por la pandemia, porque impede o acesso às vacunas, a aparelhos hospitalários e à medicina. É imperioso tomar medidas em todo o mundo por promover o acesso equitativo às vacunas contra a Covid-19 para dar condições de uma imunização massiva em 2021, principalmente nas nações mais vulneradas. Denunciamos com veemência a reserva de mercado e o acaparamento de vacinas por los países ricos. E nesse sentido, saludamos a decisão tomada no âmbito de ALBA, Aliança Bolivariana para los Pueblos de Nuestra América, de criar um banco de vacunas. E nesta cooperação, Cuba, país hermano de Venezuela e de todos os pueblos latino-americanos e caribenhos, juega papel relevante, pois está em la vanguardia do desenvolvimento de vacunas, como mostra o êxito em los ensaios clínicos de vacunas Soberana 2 e outras. Al reafirmar esta posição de princípios, denunciamos a postura do novo governo estadunidense liderado por Joe Biden, quem ha renovado a vigência do infame ordem executivo que desde 2015 impõe sanções unilaterais à Venezuela. A ofensiva imperialista contra a República Bolivariana é liderada em conjunto com a atuação desestabilizadora de governo de direitas vigente na região. Denunciamos por isso o governo de Jair Bolsonaro em Brasil, que apoia os golpistas venezolanos e hoje apoia a Juan Guaidó e seu governo ficcional, mesmo depois da completa desmoralização internacional desse obscuro político. E no ano passado, o governo Bolsonaro e as Forças Armadas brasileiras han retirado o escopo pacifista da política nacional de defesa do Brasil, deixando mostra da possibilidade de incorporar-se às aventuras militaristas e intervencionistas do imperialismo. Desde o ano passado, Jair Bolsonaro está empenhado em expulsar do país o corpo diplomático venezuelano. Denunciamos o Grupo de Lima, uma fraude diplomática, um falso organismo multilateral criado com a função princípio de respaldar desde o exterior as forças internas golpistas e preparar o terreno para uma intervenção. Igualmente, denunciamos as ações militares realizadas em território venezuelano pelos grupos terroristas armados colombianos, de ligações com o narcotráfico e respaldado pelo governo de extrema-direita de la Colômbia. É o 19 de abril, Dia de Ação Mundial em Solidariedade com o Pueblo Venezuelano, aprovado por el Conselho Mundial de la Paz em 2015, expressamos nesse momento nossa convicção de que esse pueblo vencerá. Tem forte unidade e capacidade de mobilização, união cívico-militar, um liderazgo lúcido e capaz, disposto a derrotar, custe o que custar, a ofensiva imperialista e defender suas conquistas. Estas qualidades do povo venezuelano se expressaram uma vez mais em las últimas eleições legislativas de dezembro do ano passado e em la formação de uma sólida maioria política para assegurar a continuidade da Revolução Bolivariana, inaugurando uma nova etapa de vida do país. Se acumulam forças e criam condições para derrotar a extrema-direita e os planos de intervenção do imperialismo estadunidense no país. Como dizia Chávez, esta é a época de anti-imperialismo, em que as forças de paz, de soberania nacional, os direitos dos pueblos e de la justiça estão chamados a unir-se, resistir e lutar, Para o Conselho Mundial da Paz, a ação em solidariedade com o pueblo venezolano, em apoio indeclinável à luta em defesa de sua revolução, é parte do conjunto de nossas tarefas mais sagradas, de luta por la paz em que lá estamos empenhados, nós e todos os pueblos e forças progressistas em todo o mundo. Por o fim às agressões de imperialismo estadunidense, sus cúmplices del golpismo de ingerência em la soberania de Venezuela, é nosso sagrado dever. Viva la Venezuela e su pueblo resistente. Viva Bolívia e la segunda independência de nossa América. Viva la paz, abajo o imperialismo. Graças, companheiros.
Thank you very much, Comrade Socorro, for your expression of our World Peace Council, all of us, strong support for Venezuela and its defense internationally. And now I would like to ask Comrade Arun Kumar, General Secretary of All India Peace and Solidarity Organization, to take the forum. Comrade Arun.
Thank you. Comrade, at the outset, on behalf of the All India Peace and Solidarity Organization, we thank the World Peace Council and also the US Peace Council and the COSI and the Simón Bolívar Institute in Venezuela for organizing this important event in solidarity with Venezuela. This is a global solidarity day, which is observed at the behest of the WPC on a very historical occasion where the Venezuelans had declared their independence against imperialist occupation of Spain at that point of time. Today, we consider expression of solidarity is all the more important, particularly given the circumstances in which we are living, either it be the COVID pandemic or the economic hardships that are being placed on the people around the world in the name of fighting the pandemic. First, pandemic. COVID demands solidarity from all of us because as news has been coming out, we find that only 2% of the world's poorest countries have got access to vaccines, while the richest countries in the world are storing vaccines which are many times more than the requisite numbers. This demands an immediate course correction because this pandemic has shown that unless everybody is vaccinated, unless everybody is protected, there cannot be a protection to the entire world. Today, we find the second wave or the fourth wave or the third wave, it is called in various names, but the pandemic is raging in a big way throughout the world. The only exceptions are the countries where there is a socialist system, either it be the Cuba or Vietnam or China, which have effectively controlled the spread of this disease and also are way ahead in developing vaccines. We are happy to note that Cuba is now producing the fifth, it is now under the trials, the fifth vaccine of COVID is under trials in Cuba, and it is ready to help Venezuela. It is partnering with Venezuela, in fact, in developing this vaccine. This is the path ahead for all of us. The exchange of technology, the sharing of information, and ensuring that the benefits of science and technology are available to and all the people in this world is what is needed today. For example, why we link solidarity with Venezuela, solidarity with Cuba, solidarity with Palestine, and anti-imperialist, our anti-imperialist responsibility is recently there was a Quad meeting. Quad, as many might be knowing, is a new alliance that the United States is forming with its old allies Japan and Australia and roping in India now. So US, Japan, Australia, and India are now the Quad, the four pillars of this alliance, which is mostly, most of the commentators are today calling it as the Eastern NATO. And this Quad alliance, which had a virtual meeting few days back, had decided that they will be cooperating in producing vaccine and making it available to the people of the world. But the fact is, what we are noticing in India is one of the biggest manufacturers of vaccine in India and the world, the Serum Institute, which was licensed to manufacture the AstraZeneca vaccine and also, I think, the Moderna vaccine. They are denied access to the raw material for the manufacture of the vaccine by the United States, as the US had designated that this raw material cannot be exported as it falls under the Defense Security Act. So even though there is a necessity for the world for vaccine, there is a need to produce vaccine, and there are capabilities available for the production of vaccine. It is being denied for the petty interests of the imperialist United States. This, in spite of the promise by the United States to India that it will be giving access to all the technology and resources. So what we find now is what the former Attorney General of United States, William Barr, had stated. In fact, he is coming true. I quote William Barr. He said, "The pandemic was good timing. Actually, the Trump administration is taking a kind of kick them while they are down approach, seemingly with the hope that by piling on sanctions and other actions, the administration can capitalize on the virus in Iran and Venezuela to spur greater opposition to the incumbent governments and perhaps regime change," unquote. So this is the politics of the United States, using COVID pandemic as an opportunity to further impose sanctions and also take actions so that they can go ahead with their agenda of ensuring a regime change. This is what is behind the sanctions that they are imposing on Venezuela. This is what is behind their coercive tactics on countries like India and many other developing nations throughout the world who are not ready to, of course, India is not, India is now a junior partner to the US, but other countries which are not ready to accept the dictates of the US are being coerced to fall in line. Otherwise, they will be denied access to vaccine and other medicinal technology. On the other hand, we find Cuba and even Venezuela, which has offered oil to vaccines. So these are the countries which are ready to share with the world their know-how and ready to exchange goods so that everybody can benefit and come out of the situation that we find today. And the second aspect, as we wanted to bring to your notice, is the financial situation. We find there is an immense financial crisis, a very intense financial crisis throughout the world in all countries, including our own country, India. And everywhere there are large number of attacks that are being carried out on the people. If the pro-people government in Venezuela or anti-imperialist, anti-neoliberal governments in Venezuela and other countries are being forced with sanctions. In countries like India, these governments are easily agreeing to the dictates of the international finance capital. They are ready to privatize all the public sector assets. They are ready to open up even our financial sector to foreign capital. And in this process, there are many burdens that are being posed on the working people, the farmers, and other sections of our country. That is the reason, as you might have all noticed, a large number of farmers in our country, the peasants in our country, are on an agitation struggle path for the last 4 to 5 months. And they have vowed to continue this struggle further. So why we are bringing these issues is, these are also linked to the imperialist attack on developing countries and imperialist attack to further their agenda throughout the world, to ensure that they hegemonize the entire globe. So any fight for peace, any fight for solidarity with a country that is fighting imperialism is, we consider, a fight within the country and also outside it for against the imperialism. With this, we hope that all of us will strengthen the anti-imperialist struggle in the coming days, and in the process strengthen the hands of the people of Venezuela, countries like Cuba and Palestine in their fight against imperialist domination. Thank you, comrades.
Thank you very much, Comrade Arun, for a very informative speech. I would like now to call Comrade Gabriel Aguirre, General Secretary of COSI Venezuela. I should also mention that April 21st is the 50th anniversary of the foundation of COSI Venezuela, and we are all celebrating that, and we want to convey our congratulations to comrades in Venezuela, COSI. Comrade Gabriel.
Comrade Bahman, before I
Muy buenos
before
días
Gabriel,
en América
speaks,
Latina, muy buenas tardes
please
en Europa y buenas
permit
noches
me
en
to
Asia.
leave, as I was
Muchísimas
discussing with Comrade
gracias.
Heracles and you.
Muchísimas gracias al camarada Bama.
Comrade Gabriel, microphone.
Sí, ¿me escuchan?
Okay.
Ok. Bueno, muy buenos días en América Latina, buenas tardes en Europa, buenas noches en Asia. Muchísimas gracias, camarada Bama. Queridos camaradas, en nombre del Comité de Solidaridad Internacional y Lucha por la Paz, queremos saludar fraternalmente a todas las organizaciones de paz y de solidaridad del mundo, y en especial a las que hoy han tenido la oportunidad de intercambiar con nosotros en este encuentro. El pasado año, el Consejo Mundial de la Paz arribó a sus 70 años de vida de una organización que siempre ha estado al frente de las principales luchas de la humanidad por la paz. El rol que ha jugado este instrumento de los pueblos para oponerse a las guerras imperialistas ha sido fundamental, y hoy nos damos cuenta que su vigencia continúa siendo central en la defensa de un mundo de paz, de solidaridad y de justicia social. Hoy tenemos la oportunidad de organizar este encuentro en medio de una pandemia cuya característica principal es haber puesto de manifiestos las injusticias del actual sistema mundo, que no ha logrado resolver los grandes problemas a la humanidad, entre ellos la pobreza, el hambre, el acceso a los servicios, y ha negado derechos universales como la salud. La privatización, la inequidad y la desigualdad han sido determinantes para expresarse en las trágicas cifras de contagios y decesos, sumado al apartheid de las vacunas, que han sido acaparadas por las principales potencias, confinando a los pueblos con menos recursos a una situación de desventaja y dotado de una práctica moderna de genocidio continuado en un contexto de muchas dificultades. A la par que enfrentamos la grave emergencia sanitaria mundial, las potencias imperialistas no pierden tiempo en continuar profundizando la guerra de rapiña por el control de los recursos estratégicos, de las rutas comerciales, de la fuerza de trabajo, y para ello despliegan sus fuerzas militares en los 4 puntos cardinales, incrementando el militarismo, promoviendo el incremento de las armas de destrucción masiva y desplegando sus tropas para preservar el control geopolítico y reforzar sus posiciones militares y de contención a las potencias emergentes. Han sido numerosos los esfuerzos realizados por el Secretario General de las Naciones Unidas en solicitar el cese de los conflictos bélicos en todos los rincones del mundo, así como el levantamiento de las criminales medidas coercitivas unilaterales que atentan contra los pueblos. Sin embargo, la respuesta de las potencias imperialistas ha sido mantener su despliegue militar y amenazar con escalar un nuevo conflicto, empleando a la OTAN, que sigue siendo el dedo en el gatillo del imperialismo. Estimados camaradas, mientras el mundo pensaba que el contexto de la pandemia podía ser un momento para detener las agresiones imperialistas contra los pueblos, y entre ellos Venezuela, la verdad es que el imperialismo respondió con más acciones injerencistas contra nuestro país. En Venezuela se decretó tempranamente la cuarentena desde el 14 de marzo, fueron cerradas las fronteras y anunciado el confinamiento. Tan solo un par de semanas más tarde, el imperialismo estadounidense incorporaba en su lista de narcotraficantes al presidente de la República y otros altos funcionarios de la nación. ofreciendo una recompensa por su captura y amenazando con incorporar a Venezuela entre la lista de estados que patrocinan el terrorismo. Este hecho dejaba claro que apenas iniciaba una nueva ola de agresiones y de amenazas contra Venezuela. Debemos, en nombre del COSE y del pueblo venezolano, reconocer y agradecer las posiciones y las acciones organizadas por el Consejo Mundial de la Paz, condenando este y otros hechos, así como convocando siempre a reforzar la solidaridad con Venezuela. En los meses posteriores se mantuvo el plan de agresión contra el país, pero esta vez con la preparación en territorio colombiano de un grupo de mercenarios, con la participación de exmilitares disidentes de Venezuela, que tenía como objetivo el ingreso al territorio para promover acciones terroristas que buscaban poner al frente de la nación un gobierno títere y servir a los intereses del imperialismo yanqui. Debemos recordar la conocida y frustrada operación terrorista Gedeón, accionada por un grupo de mercenarios estadounidenses, colombianos y venezolanos, que contó con la complicidad y apoyo del gobierno de Iván Duque. En esta acción, contratistas militares estadounidenses mostraron públicamente las pruebas que implicaban al fantoche de Juan Guaidó abiertamente con este hecho, el cual fracasó gracias a la oportuna acción de los cuerpos de seguridad conjuntamente con el pueblo organizado, que permitieron neutralizar esta acción. Ha sido durante este último año donde se ha reforzado la presencia militar de Estados Unidos en el Caribe. El Departamento de Defensa anunció el envío de tropas especiales a Colombia y la movilización de barcos de la Marina estadounidense a las costas del Caribe, con el supuesto argumento de la lucha contra el narcotráfico, utilizando esta excusa para justificar este grotesco despliegue militar que se suma a las bases militares estadounidenses y de la OTAN cerca del país. El imperialismo estadounidense realiza continuos esfuerzos por promover conflicto con los países con los cuales compartimos fronteras, las recurrentes violaciones a la soberanía territorial, unido al guión elaborado por Washington de pretender aislar al país, son parte de las estrategias que permita crear las condiciones para desatar una confrontación a gran escala que justifique internacionalmente la actuación eventual de su ejército en nuestro país. Junto al incremento de las agresiones políticas, militares y diplomáticas, el imperialismo estadounidense y europeo no guardaron formas con relación a los llamados realizados por las naciones libres del mundo a levantar las medidas coercitivas unilaterales conocidas como sanciones contra los países que hoy son víctimas de este instrumento que viola de forma reiterada los derechos humanos de los pueblos y que en el caso de Venezuela ha generado la muerte de cerca de 40.000 venezolanos. Hemos señalado que las sanciones se han convertido en los nuevos formatos de intervención y de agresión a los pueblos. La aplicación de estas ilegales medidas, en el caso específico de Venezuela, ha producido el sufrimiento de la población porque han estado dirigidas a estrangular el corazón de la economía, lo que se ha traducido en limitar la capacidad del Estado para atender las diferentes necesidades del desarrollo económico y social del país. El impacto de estas criminales medidas se han expresado principalmente en los sectores más vulnerables, cuya situación podría ser diferente si se liberaran los cerca de 130.000 millones de dólares que ha perdido la República como consecuencia de la aplicación de las sanciones. Desde el COSI convocamos a las organizaciones y fuerzas vivas del mundo a exigir el levantamiento incondicional de las mismas y a impulsar la construcción de un marco normativo internacional que impida la aplicación de este nuevo instrumento de agresión a los pueblos. Camaradas, el 19 de abril fue y será una fecha de gran significación para nuestro pueblo. Representa la decisión intransigente de construir un futuro independiente, de hacer valer el derecho de nuestro pueblo a la autodeterminación. Se trata de defender nuestra soberanía e independencia. Debemos decir que si nuestro pueblo se mantiene en pie, es gracias a la solidaridad del mundo. Por ello, nuestro compromiso será vencer. Hoy convocamos a todas las fuerzas progresistas, democráticas y defensoras de la paz a reforzar la lucha, a incrementar la solidaridad internacionalista y así avanzar en la construcción de un mundo de mayor justicia para la humanidad. Vivan los pueblos libres, viva la paz, vivan las organizaciones solidarias.
Thank you, Comrade Gabriel. Our next speaker is Margaret Flowers, who is a member of Executive Committee of the U.S. Peace Council, good, well-known internationally as one of the main supporters of Venezuelan People's Bolivarian Revolution. And Margaret is actually co-hosting this webinar with me. So Margaret, please.
Thank you very much, Fabian, and thank you, Heracles, Carlos, and Gabriel for inviting me to participate on this very important day of solidarity with the people of Venezuela, of the recognition of the ongoing struggle for independence from US imperialism by the people of Venezuela. I would like to express my sincere respect for the people of Venezuela, my admiration, and the solidarity of the US Peace Council with the people of Venezuela. Venezuela is a leader in Latin America in the struggle against US imperialism. And the Monroe Doctrine, which the United States continues to use against the people of Latin America. For this willingness, this effort to stand up against US imperialism, Venezuela is being severely punished. As you heard from other speakers, there are many tactics that the United States and its Western imperialist allies are using, from interference in elections, coup attempts, assassination attempts, to the severe economic war that's being waged against Venezuela, despite the fact that this economic war is in violation of international law. And there are other ways through the military aggression. The United States has moved its naval fleet to the waters around Venezuela, the largest presence in 30 years. The United States, we know, is supporting paramilitary groups in Colombia who are taking actions to try to destabilize and cause chaos in Venezuela. Also, this disinformation war in the United States. Pretty much everything that we hear in the corporate media is completely a lie about Venezuela. And so, so people here in the United States are very confused about what is actually happening down there. And that's why events like this are so important, so that we can hear directly and understand the struggle that is going on. I want to applaud the people of Venezuela, because in so many ways, you are showing all of the world an example of how to stand up with dignity against imperialism. The connections that the people of Venezuela have made to social movements around the world to show solidarity with other social movements as well is so important. The generosity of Venezuela at a time when it is struggling because of the economic war, as Comrade Gomes spoke, Venezuela has donated oxygen to Brazil to help it in its struggle against COVID-19. At a time when the Colombian government is waging a war really at the border against Venezuela, Venezuela is seeking redress through the United Nations, is seeking negotiations, dialogue, and peace with Colombia. So Venezuela shows us an example of what it means to take the high road in the face of the struggles that they're experiencing. And Venezuela is showing all of us how to build a new society, how to build a society where people participate in the policies, in the processes, in building the revolution, in building a society that uses its resources to meet the needs of the people through healthcare, education, housing, These are things that here in the United States we could learn from as we experience a deterioration of our economic situation here. So I just want to say that it's really critical that we all show solidarity with the people of Venezuela, that we in the United States understand our role to petition our government to stop its war on Venezuela, that we send delegations to Venezuela so that we can see with our own eyes what is happening, so that we can tell the truth to the people here at home. I think it's important for all of us to support the efforts that that Venezuela is waging through the International Criminal Court, through the United Nations, through these various institutions to seek, a response to the illegal practices of the United States and other Western imperialist nations. And I hope that we will continue to build and strengthen our relationships with social movements, so together we can struggle for a better world for all of us. So thank you for allowing me to be part of this event today, and my sincere solidarity with the people of Venezuela.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Our next speaker is Comrade Chris Mathego, coordinator of South African Peace Initiative, and he's speaking to us from South Africa. Comrade Chris.
Yeah, thank you very much, Comrade Barman. Allow me to acknowledge the presence of Comrade Carlos Ron, the president of the Simón Bolívar Institute, our fellow counterparts in Venezuela, COSI, led by Comrade Gabriel, the president of WPC, Comrade Socorro, the member organizations of the WPC, Comrade Heracles, and my good friend Comrade Ida, whom I haven't seen in a while. Nice seeing you here. Thank you very much. As it has been pointed out, comrades, we're meeting at a time when Venezuela itself is observing the bicentennial year of the Battle of Carabobo of the 24th of June, 1821. This was an important battle in that context and in that region. It led to the freedom of Venezuela from Spanish domination. We want to argue that today we have even far greater battles to wage against imperialism's hybrid war against Venezuela and other sister nations such as Cuba, Iran, Zimbabwe, and others. This war, in essence, is meant to suffocate and kill the ideas for which the Battle of Carabobo achieved 200 years ago. Today, imperialism has, among other things, imposed an illegal and unilateral economic blockade against Venezuela. The sanctions are intended to kill many women and children in order to create instability and chaos, and therefore prepare ground for regime change in Venezuela. All of this is against the international law and the United Nations prescript. We, the peace-loving and freedom-loving people of Africa and the world, must join our collective efforts to defeat this agenda. We must embark, we want to argue, on concrete actions and to register our disgust in our countries and combine this with a campaign for universal access to COVID-19 vaccine based on solidarity and health being a public good. We think at this period in time, it is very important to mobilize the widest possible forces behind our campaign so that we create the necessary linkages that will connect all of the world's continents and progressives across the world to register in the very strongest possible manner. They are discussed at the ongoing imperialist aggressions that have been carried out even in a post-Trump administration. This is an important struggle which will allow us to continue to build hope, confidence, and the building blocks for an alternative society that embraces humanity, that embraces peace, that embraces the coexistence of nations in a brotherly and sisterly nation. This, we think, are the very important elements of socialism. And this is what we need to be engaging around and spreading across the world. I want to thank you very much for the opportunity, and also to acknowledge that on the African continent, there is and there are progressives that are standing behind this campaign. All that we need to be doing is to articulate, as both the World Peace Council and other fraternal organizations across the world, concrete actions, concrete program that will build this movement for peace across the world. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Comrade Chris. Now I would like to introduce to you my dear comrade Aida Tuma Sliman, coordinator of Peace and Solidarity Committee in Israel and a Palestinian member of Israeli Knesset, who just was re-elected. Comrade Aida.
Thank you, Comrade Bahman. Dear comrades, good afternoon. It's so good to see all our comrades finally after such a long time. We've been isolated from each other, but for sure our solidarity, they cannot isolate in any way. First of all, I would like to congratulate on behalf of the Peace and Solidarity Committee in Israel and in the name of the Middle East region in the World Peace Council, our comrades in the International Solidarity Committee of Venezuela on their 50th anniversary, and to thank the organizers of this event from the World Peace Council, Comrade Socorro, the president of the World Peace Council, and Comrade Heracles, the general secretary, and of course the US Peace Council, Comrade Bahman. This solidarity event is much needed in these difficult times. The age of the COVID-19 crisis should have been an age of international solidarity. This year should have been one when the shared humanity of the different peoples of the world comes to the fore. Understand that equitable international cooperation and coordination is the only possible tool for combating the dangerous virus. But unfortunately, what we saw for the most part, with important exceptions, is a deepening of economic inequality and chauvinistic nationalism. The richest corporation and people in the world became richer, while the poor are struggling with the double threat of deadly pandemic and economic hardships. The international capitalist class, mobilized by big pharmaceutical companies, is generating a global reality of vaccine apartheid, fueled by vaccine nationalism. Countries like Israel and the US are beginning to exit the pandemic thanks to the vaccines, while coronavirus is running wild in the Palestinian occupied territories and in the poorer countries of Latin America. This year saw a huge increase in global injustice, and nowhere is this clearer than in Venezuela. The American-led sanctions and embargo on Venezuela is not new. It has been a part of the imperialist approach toward Venezuela since it started questioning the global capitalist order. But the US-led sanctions during this crisis, backed by its allies in Europe, Canada, and more countries are taking the imperialist violence to a whole new level, preventing life-saving assistance to Venezuela during a medical emergency. Venezuela is seeing a surge in coronavirus cases in recent weeks. But just a few days ago, the IMF, an international agency clearly aligned with US foreign policy, announced that it is going to deny Venezuela drawing rights of $5 billion to stabilize its economy. The reason is that US-backed agency does not recognize the elected government of Venezuela and is still dedicated to the puppet president that has no popular Venezuelan backing. The US pressure toward Venezuela is more like to a war, especially during the Trump years, has been immense, intensifying the economic crisis and the inflation in the country. The peak of this pressure was the failed coup attempt in 2019 and the international wave of recognition in the puppet president Guaido. Unfortunately, there is no sign that the new US administration is going to change anything. In recent days, a resolution on the negative impact of unilateral sanctions on the enjoyment of human rights was approved in the Human Rights of the United Nations. Its impact is so obvious that the countries that voted against it should lose their seat on the Council. The Human Rights Council, with the support of 30 countries, approved the resolution while 15 voted against it. The Cuban foreign minister, Mr. Perella, Comrade Perella, expressed that Venezuela's classification as an unusual and extraordinary threat to the United States is intended to justify the application of illegal unilateral coercive measures. The actions of systematic aggression, attempts at destabilization, and economic asphyxia against this country must cease. US President Joe Biden is still backing the criminal Trump administration foreign policy vis-a-vis Venezuela, i.e. the right-wing attempts to overthrow the legitimate government by force and the blockade, the continuous war against the Venezuelan masses. Now is the time for solidarity with Venezuela and with the progressive forces of Latin America, facing intensified US imperial pressure and another breakout of the pandemic. We in the Peace and Solidarity Committee in Israel recognize and appreciate and value highly the deep dedication of the Venezuelan people and its leadership to the international struggle against the Israeli occupation and for the establishment of an independent Palestinian state on the borders of 1967 with Jerusalem as its capital, the liberation of the Palestinian people from occupation. We also recognize that a factor in the international delegitimization of the Venezuelan elected government relies on its solidarity with the Palestinian people. We believe this solidarity is in the heart of our joint political vision. The democratic forces and the Communist Party of Israel and the Peace Committee and Solidarity Committee in Israel are dedicated to the efforts of solidarity with the Venezuelan people and will continue to stand against Israel's recognition of the puppet so-called president and its ties with the dangerous right-wing forces in Venezuela and the region. Only the Venezuelan people should decide its government, and the forces of democracy must hold steady
Thank you very much, Comrade Aida. Our last speaker is Iraklis Zavdaridis, General Secretary of the World Peace Council. He's the last one upon his own request out of modesty, but not for any other reason. Comrade Iraklis.
Thank you, Comrade Bachmann. Dear comrades and friends, special greetings to our comrades from Venezuela. The English channel is gone? Can you hear me now, Bachmann, comrades? Hello? Can you hear me now? Bachmann, can you hear me?
We hear you, Iraklis.
Okay, then let me continue. Special greetings today. The event is dedicated to the Global Day of Action in Solidarity with the people of Venezuela. Therefore, special greetings to our comrades from Venezuela, our special guest speaker, Carlos Ron, Comrade Carlos Ron, in his double capacity as president of the Simón Bolívar Institute and vice foreign minister, and of course to our Comrade Gabriel Aguirre from the COSI, well known to all of us. The World Peace Council is proud for having taken this initiative in 2015, calling for a global day of action in solidarity with the people of Venezuela on this emblematic date, the 19th of April, tomorrow, which is the day of when the people of Venezuela published the Declaration of Independence from the Spanish colonialism, starting the battle for their independence, which culminated in the Battle of Carabobo in June in 1910. When we, in 1921, which is then 200 years in June, when we initiated this campaign, which has been embraced by dozens of organizations and movements in the world all these years, through which millions have taken part in various solidarity events with Venezuela and protests against the imperialists and its mechanisms, the situation was still not as serious as it is today, especially 1 year after the global pandemic of COVID-19. This is obvious. The USA, the European Union and its governments, the reactionary governments of the so-called Lima Group, and the Organization of American States, the OAS, which is offering always its good services, in inverted commas, to the US imperialism, have multiplied their subversive actions in the recent years. We are vigilant in the observation of the imperialist plans, which do not exclude even military interventions, whereas we know that the US has a number of military forces on land, air, and sea around Venezuela, in Colombia, and other willing allies. US imperialism has anyway a long record of such interventions and coups in the region. The concept is to try to strangle and to asphyxiate the country and its people economically so that the discontent will grow and the government will fall. Sanctions, siege, economic blockade, and dozens of concrete coercive unilateral measures are being applied so that the country cannot extract oil, crude oil, cannot refine it for fuel, and of course cannot export it even if tankers would be available, which are not for the transport. The grave restrictions and obstacles in the import of fuel have led to a lack of gasoline in daily life in a country where fuel some years ago was almost for free. We are well aware that Venezuela, as the richest country in oil reserves worldwide, constitutes a permanent target for the imperialists, especially for the USA, which lost an important ally some more than 20 years ago in their backyard. The fact that the income of Venezuela from oil is today only 1% of what it was 8 years ago speaks for itself. The consequences on daily life of the proud people of Venezuela are severe. Thousands of families have sincere problems of decent living conditions, despite the efforts of the government to subsidize basic goods. The inflation is growing and the devaluation of the currency is liquidating the purchase power of the average Venezuelans. Additionally to the above, the country has faced organized destabilization efforts, and turbulent politically motivated chaos in the streets of Caracas and other cities several times in the last years, with armed protesters and street blocks orchestrated by forces of the oligarchy and in close coordination with foreign forces from abroad. Many civilians have lost their lives by snipers and by blind shooting on people. As all this would not be enough, the reactionary forces, the oligarchy, escalated the aggression some years ago. The unique example worldwide and historically first time has occurred. The Speaker of the Venezuelan Parliament, the chairperson or president of the Venezuelan Parliament then, in January 2009, named Juan Guaidó, proclaimed himself as interim president of the country, and within few days, what a surprise, the US administration, the Lima Group, and the first European governments recognized him as the legitimate representative of the country. Amongst the first European governments were the ones of Spain and Portugal. I'm mentioning this because they're supposed to be the social democratic governments, which are supposedly different from the conservative ones, who recognized Guaidó, and likewise these countries have championed and still are championing, also in the freezing of assets and bank deposits of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela till today. They are competing in the theft of the resources and of Venezuela. They are competing in this theft and this robbery with the US administration of Trump, which is continuing today, which practiced actually a piracy, kind of piracy of the properties and income of the state company of PDVSA, the Petróleos de Venezuela, and its daughter chain company of fuel stations, Citgo, in the US, by just taking away this property from the control of the Venezuelan state. The same theft and illegal confiscation of funds was practiced in the United Kingdom, in Switzerland, and several other countries. And I underline here, allow me to clarify, that all these measures, political, economical, and on the military threats level, are continuing with the new Biden administration. The executive order of President Obama then continued during the Trump administration and is being maintained by the Biden administration, the recognition of Guaidó likewise, etc., etc. The European Union recognized likewise Juan Guaidó, which is a proven puppet of the imperialists, as so-called interim president. The immoral and politically ambiguous stand of the EU ignore the fact that Guaidó and his people openly called for an armed coup and stood behind the attempt to assassinate the elected and legitimate president of the country, Nicolás Maduro. The hypocrisy of the imperialists has no end. Last December, a new National Assembly was elected by the people, which the US, the European Union, and the Organization of American States do not recognize. They continue playing the card of Guaidó, although he is not anymore the Speaker of the Parliament, and despite the fact that some of the right-wing opposition forces took part in the election of December 2020, distancing themselves from this Guaidó practice. The US, the European Union, and the OAS have no moral principles and rights to teach the people of Venezuela democratic standards, and their multifaceted interference is against any sense of the founding principles of the UN Charter and international law. Often we hear and read in the European countries that Venezuela is the example of the collapse of and failure of socialism. The social and economic problems of the people of Venezuela, the suffering of the Venezuelan people is not an expression of the crisis of socialism. It is a clear expression of the crisis of capitalism, which we observe in the capitalist world in a synchronized way. This is being aggravated by the sanctions and the imperialist interference in all spheres of life in the country, and additionally by the health pandemic of COVID-19. The achievements and changes made after the victory of President Hugo Chavez in 1998, with the mass-based support by the people and the anti-imperialist forces, created new conditions for the people of Venezuela for the first time. And they opened the way for social and political emancipation of the people, It is only the people of Venezuela who can decide and determine the depth and the direction of these changes, the defense of the achievements, and the deepening of the transformation, so that the people of Venezuela will become the masters of their wealth and of their fortunes. The World Peace Council, acting in more than 95 countries, with its members and friends, stand by the people of Venezuela against the imperialist maneuvers and threats which are coming hand in hand with the local oligarchy. We reiterate our position about the legitimate leadership of the country under the presidency of Nicolás Maduro. This webinar today, comrades and friends, is an expression of the internationalist solidarity worldwide with the people, which is resisting and fighting with dignity for its sovereign right to decide alone its future. As World Peace Council, we declare our solidarity with all the peoples struggling for their just causes all over the world, in all continents. But in particular, besides Venezuela today, also with the people of Cuba, which is commemorating and celebrating these very days, the 60 years from the defeat of the imperialist aggression and incursion of the Bay of Pigs, and the 60 years from the declaration of the socialist character of the Cuban Revolution by its historical leader, Fidel Castro. Last but not least, in order to conclude, we would like to congratulate our affiliated organization, the Committee for International Solidarity and Struggle for Peace, COSI, for its 50th anniversary in the coming days on 21st of April. COSI was affiliated from the very first moment in 1971 to the World Peace Council and stood firm and committed to the goals and positions of the WPC. COSI is a prestigious member of the leadership of the World Peace Council. It is playing an important role in Latin America. Many of its leaders have performed an outstanding role in the political and social struggles in the country and internationally. We all recall the 19th World Assembly of the World Peace Council, which was hosted by COSI and the Venezuelan people in April 2008 in Caracas, with a huge participation of delegates and countries. We were and we are proud for the fact that the late President Hugo Chavez gave then his personal support and blessing to this World Peace Council Assembly then in 2008, which converted Caracas into the capital of the anti-imperialist struggle and the struggle for peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Comrade Iraklis. This brings our speaking session segment to the end. And I would like to ask my comrade Margaret to moderate the question and answer period of this webinar. Margaret, please. I guess I'll start until Margaret comes back. One of the questions we have is, please discuss the importance of economic and political support to Venezuela of countries such as Russia, China, and Iran. Please add to our knowledge of other countries that are skirting the killing US sanctions to help Venezuela. Probably Comrade Carlos, you could start with that answer.
Thank you, Oman. And again, thank you everyone for all of your interventions that have been very good. Paso al español. Decíamos y le preguntaban, ¿no? Sobre la relación con otros países y cómo ha sido la relación de solidaridad. Fíjense que ha sido muy importante para la defensa, para la estabilidad de Venezuela, para evadir ese cerco y ese bloqueo criminal que nos ha colocado Estados Unidos, contar con el apoyo de países amigos. En particular, en el caso, podemos poner como ejemplo el caso de la pandemia, que si no hubiese sido por la solidaridad de países como China, como Cuba, como Irán, como Rusia, inclusive como Turquía, no hubiésemos podido de verdad lograr tener aquí en Venezuela ni tratamientos para combatir la enfermedad, ni equipos de protección, ni pruebas, porque ha sido muy difícil por el bloqueo nosotros salir a un mercado como pudiese hacer cualquier otro país, salir a un mercado internacional y comprar esos insumos que no se producen en Venezuela. Bueno, aquí no tenemos cómo hacerlo porque las medidas coercitivas, aun cuando dicen en algún momento en las órdenes ejecutivas que los insumos humanitarios no están, digamos, no hay medidas contra la importación de insumos humanitarios. En realidad eso no es verdad, porque las empresas temen que tan solo hacer alguna transacción con Venezuela pueda significar alguna represalia contra esas empresas. Entonces simplemente no trabajan con Venezuela, o en caso de que la empresa esté dispuesta a correr el riesgo que significa trabajar con Venezuela, no podemos hacer un pago porque el sistema financiero internacional que está controlado por Estados Unidos está bloqueado para nosotros. Entonces no hay capacidad de nosotros hacer la transacción. Los hermanos y hermanas de Cuba vinieron aquí con sus brigadas de médicos, la brigada de Henry Reed, que ojalá tenga el reconocimiento del premio Nobel y todos los otros reconocimientos posibles por su expresión de humanidad y solidaridad. Estuvieron aquí con nosotros. China nos ha ayudado también con su asesoría para combatir la pandemia. Igual, como les decía, los otros países nos han ayudado mucho. Entonces es importante que esa solidaridad que esos países han tenido con Venezuela, más allá de las relaciones comerciales, es una relación de valentía, es una relación de solidaridad, tener esos lazos con Venezuela, y nosotros siempre estaremos muy agradecidos.
I see that Margaret is back. So Margaret, could you please continue?
Yes, my apologies. Was that the question from Henry that you asked?
Yes.
Okay. So, and I'm wondering if there are other people who would like to share their thoughts on this question as well, or Carlos, if you can talk also about the effort within the United Nations to bring nations together to work together to stop the economic war. Can you talk about that? And then maybe others can comment about ways that we can be supportive of that.
Sí, gracias, Margaret. Sabes que una de las iniciativas muy importantes que se está llevando a cabo en este momento es que ya varios países han suscrito dentro de Naciones Unidas una carta de apoyo a la conformación de un grupo de amigos, de países amigos en defensa de la Carta de Naciones Unidas. Ahora, esto es importante porque más allá del tema particular de Venezuela, la defensa de la Carta de Naciones Unidas es una defensa del derecho internacional, es una defensa de la no agresión, es una defensa de no promover estas medidas coercitivas unilaterales, de respetar las reglas del juego internacional, como hemos dicho, las reglas del derecho. Y hay muchos países, entre ellos están, por supuesto, está China y está Rusia, que son dos países miembros del Consejo de Seguridad, y eso le da, por supuesto, una fuerza importante al espacio, pero hay muchos países más, y lo que refleja es que esto no se hace en contra de nadie. O sea, no es que, como han querido en algún momento señalar, que es una posición, no es una posición hostil a nadie, por el contrario, es una posición en defensa de los principios que todos creemos que se deben respetar, que es la paz, la construcción de la paz y la construcción del diálogo entre países. Naciones Unidas también ha sido muy importante, y bueno que comentas ese punto, porque ha sido muy importante también para Venezuela en aliviar las cargas de la pandemia, porque gracias a la Organización Mundial de la Salud, a través de la Organización Panamericana de la Salud, también hemos podido acceder a muchos insumos médicos que han sido necesarios durante esta pandemia. Nosotros creemos fielmente en el multilateralismo, en la importancia de que entre las naciones haya respeto, haya la construcción de la paz y haya el diálogo. Y eso es muy importante defenderlo en todo momento. Gracias.
Thank you, Carlos. Is there anybody else who would like to speak about the effort at the United Nations level to have nations work together in defense of the United Nations Charter, and perhaps if we are members of a country that doesn't belong to that, ways that we can support that?
Great. May I say a few words?
Please
Just to add also from a different angle, from the same political perspective angle, but from the movement side. You know that we all know, and you all know, that the UN system is, of course, a very sophisticated and complicated system in which also the so-called civil society, the non-governmental organizations, although the World Peace Council is a non-governmental organization, with the bad reputation the NGOs have in the world, the millionaire NGOs which are getting the money from the foundations and actually from the governments and then spreading to the smaller NGOs. We don't like the term NGO as such, because we are a real non-governmental organization. But anyway, the World Peace Council historically has a status of consultative status with the UN bodies, with almost all UN bodies, and especially with the Human Rights Council based in Geneva. We have our permanent representatives, and we are also accrediting our Venezuelan comrades from COSI, and also comrades from Brazil have attended, and other countries from Zebra Pass, meaning when I say Brazil, and also myself. I had the it is not a real pleasure. I had the honor, but it is not a real pleasure, because when you go as a NGO to the United Nations in Geneva, to the Human Rights Council, you get, after a long and complicated effort and practice, of bureaucratic procedures, maybe the floor for 1.5 or 2 minutes. Comrade Gabriel Aguirre, the General Secretary of COSI, has done this several times, 6, 7, 10 times, in different sessions in March and September and in July, and he knows that. And sometimes they, because they apply in the UN also the practice of who you are and what you stand for, sometimes they forget you, and then you have to protest and so on. Nevertheless, we value and we appreciate even this limited possibility to intervene there, and we make our voice heard in Geneva at the Human Rights Council. I want to say that, and we have done this for cases of Cuba, of Venezuela, of Syria, of Palestine, of Vietnam, of China, of wherever countries and states, and of course their peoples, are under threats and aggression by the imperialist forces and mechanisms. We are there with our principal solidarity. And the same we are doing, and we have done several times with the case of Venezuela, self-understandingly. I want to add just one more word regarding the Human Rights Council. When we speak, and this is the view of myself, it is also the view of the World Peace Council, just allow me to express it in a personal level now. When we speak about the High Commissioner of Human Rights, which is currently Mrs. Michelle Bachelet, but it is not related only to persons, because we know that this cargo, this office of the Human Rights High Commissioner, is also bound and part of the complications and the contradictions of this international imperialist system. So I want to stress here that several times the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva is acting in a very strange and ambiguous way, although she is from Latin America and should understand better the realities of, and historically, of the Monroe Doctrine and the practice of US imperialism towards Latin America. Unfortunately, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva is not doing so, and trying to play the card of the neutrality. There is no neutrality. There is a clear violation of international law, which the Human Rights Council as body of the UN should protect, should defend. And there cannot be a neutral position as such, which at the end goes against the inalienable rights and the sovereign rights of the people of Venezuela and its government.
Thank you, Heracles. Is there anybody else who would like to speak to that question? Okay, we have another question, and this is another very large question. Anybody could start to address it. And it's how do we, I guess as social movements, how do we confront the huge military power of the United States and its Western allies? Does anybody have thoughts on that? And I just want to remind our participants today, the audience, that if you have questions for any of the panelists, please do put those in the Q&A icon. It's at the bottom of the screen, and you can write your question in there. But does anybody have thoughts on what we can be doing to confront this military power? We live in a dangerous time. The United States security strategy is great power conflict, and we see the U.S. Taking actions every day to antagonize China and Russia. Puts us in a dangerous situation.
Margaret, if I don't know if Socorro also wants to say something later, but allow me to say a few words. As I said earlier, with the analysis and the assessment that this world is dominated by the imperialism as an international system, it is obvious that the aggressive policies of imperialist states, which include economical, political, and of course military actions, and are of such content, are threatening all the world, the peace and stability in the world. The European Union, which was considered some years ago, it was never, but it was considered that it is more a political and economical union, has proved that it is, of course, also a military union. It has it's building up its EU army, European Union army, hand in hand, officially by the papers and by the documents of the summits of the European Union and of NATO, hand in hand with NATO. The sanctions applied against Russia or China in the European Union are always by unanimity, unanimous. This means that no member states have ever raised a veto or blocked these decisions. The current situation with Venezuela, as I said also in my introduction, the European Union is recognizing still on a different level and a different wording Juan Guaido as not necessarily as the interim president, but as a representative of Venezuela, of the country. And the hypocrisy is that they don't recognize the elections of December for the National Assembly, the parliament, and of course they do not say that there is a legitimate government under the presidency of Nicolas Maduro. So they are playing around, but they have never objected the executive order of President Obama, maintained by President Trump and now President Biden. They have never distanced themselves from such subversive actions. NATO on its side, just in the neighborhood of Venezuela, has incorporated Colombia, one of the most willing allies of imperialism, into its ranks. Colombia counts with a status actually as a member, like a member of NATO, which means a lot. And not to mention the rest of the world. I think it's not appropriate now today to talk about the Ukraine or the aggressions in the Asia Pacific, which now is being called Indo-Pacific, for the purposes and the goals of the imperialists in that part of the world. If we stay in Latin America and around Venezuela, you will see that as it was correctly said, military invasion we didn't have yet openly and massively, but this threat accompanies the political sanctions, the interference, the siege, and the strangling of the people, and at the same time, from all sides, air, land, and sea, Venezuela is in a permanent threat. This means that even the resources which Venezuela could dedicate more for the living of the people, for drugs, for medicine and food, it has to dedicate certain percentage necessarily for the self-defense and for the maintenance of its armed forces, which are in defense for their fatherland. So this means that it is all around a system which affects the case of Venezuela, like it does in many other corners of the world, many other peoples and countries.
Thank you. And President Gomes, would you like to comment?
Gracias, companheiros. Fazer um comentário, pero com la limitação de la linguagem, não? Então, por primeiro, essa é uma questão que é definidora. A questão da unidade dos povos nessa luta contra o imperialismo na atualidade. Porque o que está ocorrendo aqui no continente latino-americano foi uma política devastadora, uma política deletéria de los Estados Unidos para retomar a dominação do continente. E, por supuesto, aunque em Europa também a extrema-direita conquistou avanços, pero o continente latino-americano resistia até tempos atrás. Pero com os golpes e com a chamada guerra híbrida, ou seja, os golpes e o uso de la máquina estatal, de lo judiciário, de las leis, para perseguir e destruir o Estado e as instituições democráticas, como ocorreu em Honduras, Paraguai, Bolívia há pouquíssimo tempo, no? Argentina e em Brasil. Então, em todos os países. E em Venezuela, o que ocorreu? Venezuela encontrou uma resistência, encontrou uma força maior. E o imperialismo, por suposto, Venezuela é o país que tem uma riqueza imensa, imensa do ponto de vista de energia, como também o Brasil e os países da Amazônia. Então, se o imperialismo busca e vai tentar, aunque com Biden se dizendo um demócrata, é um demócrata do ponto de vista de unificar a política e as forças reacionárias de los Estados Unidos e las potências, como ele chama, que vai tratar de uma forma multilateral, mas é a multilateralidade de las potências imperialistas para atacar a los pueblos em continente e também, como disse os companheiros, inclusive o companheiro Iraque ahorita, como a Rússia, como a China, como que é uma forma de tentar manter sua dominação, porque, por suposto, ele está decadente. É um império que moralmente foi demonstrado a sua total incapacidade de conviver de uma forma cooperativa com outras nações. Tanto é que liderou a apropriação de los insumos para tratar da saúde na maior tragédia sanitária que conhecemos, por menos há mais de 100 anos. No entanto, os Estados Unidos, com Biden, diz não, la vacuna é para o braço do estadunidense. Então, e do ponto de vista do bloqueio criminal contra a Venezuela, contra Irã, contra Cuba, contra outros países, mas para falar solamente de acá, é um bloqueio monstruoso que não demonstra nenhuma empatia com o que seja sentimento de humanidade. E sob Biden, governo Biden, do dito democrata, continua, porque nos Estados Unidos não há diferença entre democrata e republicano do ponto de vista da política externa. Não? Muda um pouquinho aqui, um pouquinho ali, é mais coisa de fantasia, não? É mais coisa de discurso, porque na essência é aquela questão de um império antipovo, antipaz, não é? E que não aceita a convivência com respeito à autodeterminação dos pueblos. Então, se para nós está na ordem do dia a unidade, a solidariedade em defesa dos pueblos vítimas, como é Venezuela, como é o Saara Ocidental, como é Palestina, como é o Irã, como é Rússia e China, com todas as diferenças. Cada país, cada pueblo escolhe o seu caminho de acordo com sua vontade. O que o Conselho Mundial da Paz e todos os militantes amantes da paz não aceitam é romper a autodeterminação e o respeito à soberania, à vontade, à democracia de cada pueblo, de acordo com sua maneira de pensar, com seu querer. E isto é que o Império Estadunidense vem fazendo. E isso é necessário muita unidade por la paz e compreendendo que a paz é possível se respeita. Então, os Estados Unidos não lhe gusta a paz. Não lhe gusta a paz. Veja o que está fazendo agora há pouco, não? No Oriente, contra a China. As mudanças, entende, do ponto de vista de armamento e contra a Rússia. E usando ali as regiões da Ucrânia. Enfim, nós não podemos aceitar e devemos, para nós, unidade e buscar o máximo de apoio para a solidariedade e para a luta anti-imperialista por la paz. É só isso e queria mais uma vez trazer o nosso abraço ao povo venezuelano, não? Que transmita ao povo e à liderança legitimamente eleita, não? Do presidente Nicolás Maduro e ao companheiro Gabriel Aguirre de Cosi, né? E as palavras da companheira Margarete, muito forte, muito contundente. Tudo que a grande mídia fala sobre Venezuela é mentira, é propaganda de guerra, não? Então não podemos aceitar. Então um grande abraço a todos os companheiros que estiveram aqui nessa live e para mim personalmente, falando em meu nome, é extremamente alentador. Apesar de toda a tragédia, é uma alegria vermos pessoas de todos os continentes reunidos com um ideal, não? A questão da solidariedade, a questão da paz e da unidade dos pueblos. Graças, companheiros.
Thank you, President Gomes. So one of the early questions that was posted, there were actually two people that posted a question and a comment about the way that we frame the struggle and whether you believe that it's important to enunciate that, you know, capitalism, neoliberalism versus socialism and communism. I don't know if Gabriel, if you have thoughts on this, or if anyone has thoughts on why it's important to make this distinction in the struggle that we're waging. Anyone? I see President Gomes, you're speaking, but you're muted. Let me.
Sobre o ponto de vista da luta anticapitalista, da luta por o socialismo, eu penso que esta também são anseios dos povos. Pero para o Conselho Mundial por la Paz, eu creio que nós podemos unir, somar na luta por la paz, na luta para combater a guerra, o imperialismo e na luta pela defesa dos princípios de autodeterminação e de independência dos pueblos. E cada pueblo escolhe o seu destino, não? Então, cada pueblo escolhe construir a sua maneira, né? Como cada um, vamos dizer, uma sociedade melhor. Eu acredito personalmente numa sociedade melhor e não creio que sob o capitalismo haja possibilidade de vida justa, buena, saudável. O capitalismo demonstra ser deletério na sua essência e opressor. Pero eu creio que para o Conselho Mundial da Paz nós devemos buscar uma amplitude para além dos socialistas, né? É isto, companheira.
Excellent. And with the little bit of time that we have left, there was a question about what is happening at the border of Venezuela with Colombia, particularly in the Apure region, and how serious that situation is there. Perhaps Carlos or Gabriel.
Sí, a ver, para resumirlo brevemente, porque sabemos que tenemos poco tiempo. Lo que ha sucedido en días recientes en la frontera entre Venezuela y Colombia no lo podemos ver aislado de otros momentos en que Colombia, el gobierno actual de Iván Duque, ha estado formando parte de las agresiones en contra de nuestro país. Y lo digo porque uno ve con mucha curiosidad cómo los movimientos, o mejor dicho, las organizaciones que están allí tratando de entrar a Venezuela, estas organizaciones armadas, criminales, que forman parte de una red de narcotráfico y de violencia paramilitar, estas organizaciones cuentan con un apoyo por parte del gobierno colombiano que se manifiesta cuando, una vez que Venezuela trata de sacarlos del espacio venezolano, ellos no son perseguidos, no son detenidos, no son buscados en Colombia, sino que simplemente ellos logran estar a salvo, ¿no? Llegan a su lugar de tranquilidad en territorio colombiano. ¿Y por qué hay que verlo en el marco de las otras agresiones? O sea, desde Colombia se han entrenado, como ya lo habían dicho antes algunos compañeros y compañeras, se han entrenado grupos paramilitares para venir a Venezuela. La invasión que sucedió en 2020 bajo la Operación Gedeón fue grupos armados que se entrenaron en Colombia, que recibieron apoyo inclusive de entrenadores de militares estadounidenses, y han estado allí también tratando de atacar o de participar en este ataque a Venezuela. Lo que sucedió fue que el ejército bolivariano tomó acciones en contra de un grupo armado que estaba en la frontera, que está tratando de abrir espacios para el narcotráfico, que atacó a la zona civil de la región, atacando puestos militares, atacando una estación de servicio eléctrico, atacando la aduana, o sea, creando terror en la población, para luego esto sumarse dentro de la gran campaña, que como decían Socorro antes, ¿no? Una gran campaña mediática en contra de Venezuela, bueno, y decir que en Venezuela se amparan grupos terroristas o que en Venezuela hay una crisis tan grande por causa del ejército venezolano que está generando una ola masiva de migración hacia Colombia. O sea, presentar a Venezuela como el factor de desestabilización de la región. Ese es el origen principal de estas acciones. Y como hay esa complicidad de Colombia, como seguro la hay también en cierta manera de Estados Unidos, porque justo semanas antes de que esto sucediera se instaló un comando especial donde hay colaboración de fuerzas militares de Estados Unidos con fuerzas militares de Colombia en la región. Entonces, bueno, no es la primera vez que vemos este tipo de acciones de sabotaje para tratar de crear tensión dentro de Venezuela y que después haya algún tipo de problema o provocar un conflicto entre los dos países. Afortunadamente, bueno, hemos ido resolviendo esta situación, una fuerte presencia de movimientos sociales, de organizaciones políticas en la región, de organizaciones incluso de derechos humanos, no las de derechos humanos que son financiadas por Estados Unidos y que lo que hacían era reproducir la narrativa negativa, sino de verdaderas organizaciones de derechos humanos que han estado ayudando a que todo vuelva a la paz junto con nuestra Fuerza Armada Bolivariana y a librar a esa zona de ese peligro paramilitar y terrorista que está allí. Seguiremos enfrentando eso como cualquier amenaza que hemos enfrentado contra nuestro país.
Thank you, Carlos. Heracles, would you like to make a few comments perhaps about what people can do?
Yes, I noticed that in the chat some friends, attendees mentioned, yes, okay, but what about actions? First of all, allow me to inform you that because of the limitation of this webinar, we asked the members and friends of the World Peace Council to send short video solidarity messages of 1 minute. We have already received 6 of them, and others will follow today and tomorrow, so that we can, in cooperation with the COSI and our Venezuelan friends, publish and post and share these video messages together with the recorded webinar today, which shows also the international impact and support the Venezuelan just struggle has. Secondly, regarding actions, it is important to keep on highest alert and denounce the, let's call it in brief, regime change policy, not only of the US, but also of the European Union and its governments, the Lima Group and the Organization of American States, which have never stopped their actions. Second issue, to pressurize the governments which apply the sanctions bilaterally or multilaterally against Venezuela to stop it, and to raise awareness and spread the information for this robbing, for this theft, for this piracy against the assets and properties of Venezuela, whether in the US with Citgo or in different banks of the world. This is money of the Venezuelan people, and especially in these days of the pandemic, very important. Third, to raise our voice in this difficult, of course, times, this different, the conditions are different within the UN and its bodies, also in Geneva and the Human Rights Council, as I mentioned before, not to stop raising our voice, protesting and declaring our, how to say, with our arguments, our solidarity with the people of Venezuela and peoples in need. And fourth, to raise general awareness and conscience, anti-imperialist solidarity with the peoples who are struggling for their just cause. The case of Venezuela, without underestimating others, are of highest priority for us. And this is my closing word. Thank you.
Thank you, Heracles. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Bahman to end the webinar.
Well, thank you, Margaret, for helping, first of all. I would like to thank all of you who participated, especially Carlos Ron. I know he has been in communication with me for a while, and I know they are doing tens or dozens of things right now in Venezuela for the occasion. So thank you for taking time to be part of our webinar. I also want to thank Comrade Socorro Gomes for leading us in this effort, and also Comrade Heracles for all the help that he gave for putting it together. Also all of our speakers from around the world. And again, I apologize for other members of the World Peace Council who were not included because of the limits of time and space that we had, and we hope that in other occasions we can accommodate many more of our comrades from different places and points of the world to more additional webinars on these issues that are very important. And I think World Peace Council is playing a great role in this. I would like to also thank all of our audience for joining us, raising the important questions, and hopefully moving on to organize against imperialism and its unilateral coercive measures against all people of the world, actually. More than 39 countries are now facing this kind of pressure. And in the time of COVID, it's really humanitarian, not only necessarily ideological, to fight against imperialism. So I would like to thank you all and invite you to follow what the World Peace Council is doing and try to help and bring our forces together so that we can create a united front against imperialism around the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Gracias. Saludo.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, comrades.
Bye.
Até logo, camaradas. Gracias.
And thank you to our interpreters.
Thank you.
Yeah.